Hey yo, how's everyone doing? So for today I started off talking about the culture behind Vabbian because I've wanted to talk about that for a long time. And then, well, I came to the realization that if Vabbian continues the way it does, it will become the most narcissistic place in the world. So yeah, let's talk about that. So for this video I really want to discuss the culture behind Vabbian because not in the last video but the video before that I got into a bit of a ramble on wanting to implement a complex culture between Vabbian, and I just thought like that topic needs a bit more, and to fully discuss that topic would probably also need a lot more videos because, as I said, I wanted it to be quite complex when it came to the culture. So for today I just want to talk about what I think is the culture behind Vabbian, and yeah, we will see where we go from there, because I do have the tendency to just go off topic. Like I discuss a topic on like the first 2 minutes and then I find some side topic where I go off for the rest of the video. So I will try to keep it towards the culture of Vabbian. But anyway, to quickly start off this topic, the culture of Vabbian is pretty much all wealth on display, or everything on display. And I think you can already see that in the buildings. Like the buildings are very, well, I wouldn't say detailed, but they are very, every building just screams at you. Screams wealth or some other thing at you to draw your interest. Even like a little corner building, I try to make it try and outshine all the other buildings. This does stem from Vabbi, the home country I have in mind for Vabbian. Because in Vabbi, wealth is very much on display. Like, if you are wealthy in Vabbi, you basically have it all, and if you're not, then you're pretty much screwed, because Vabbi doesn't have a military or something. Like, they do have some guards maybe in towns, but beyond that, you're pretty much on your own unless you can pay for your guard. So if you aren't wealthy, you don't have, let's say, any protection outside of towns. An aspiring trader, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, you won't have any protection from bandits or wildlife. So Vabbi is pretty much a place where you are either very rich or you're not. It's the friendliest way of saying it. You can kind of dangle in between those two, but most of the times it's one of the two. Like, you're either rich or you're not. You either have influence in Vabbi or you have not. Because Vabbi, as I see it, is very like, it is almost two societies in one. You have the rich people and then everyone else. And the rich only concern themselves with themselves. Like, they don't really, have that nation feel. Basically, it's every rich person for themselves, and every rich person wants to impress the other rich person and doesn't care about, let's say, their servants or anything. Though I do think that Vaddjian would probably be a bit different, because in Vabbi you don't really have that struggle for survival that Vaddjian has known. Like, I do think that in the early stages of development on Vaddjian, it was pretty much a struggle because of the cold, because of the lack of natural resources from Vabbian. It would in the beginning be pretty much all based on survival. Later they probably found wealth, or they found it early but knew that in the beginning they couldn't really tap into that. Because you can harvest all the gold and gemstones you want, which I do think is going to be the primary export of Vabbian. But you can't eat gemstones. Gemstones won't keep you warm at night when there's a freaking blizzard going on. So I do think Vabbian is kind of more friendly in that way. Well, not friendly, but they are kind of more looking out for each other than, let's say, a person in Vabbi would. They still retain that wealth on display attitude, but it's not that they just don't really care about other people. So I do think there's a little bit more of like a community in Vabbian than there would be in Vabbi. And then with community, I mean like complete town, like not just rich community and not rich community. Yeah, that's my thought on the social things surrounding Vabbian, and I quickly want to go into that wealth on display, because I do think, of course, gemstones, gold, all that things are wealth, but in Vabbian, water and heat is also seen as wealth, or just as power. This mainly stems from the idea that water in Vabbian is kind of a scarce resource. Like, yeah, you have a lot of snow, a lot of ice that you could melt, but to get it on a scale that would suffice the needs of a town, you would need some pretty damn good inventions to supply a whole town. So I do think that Vabbian really pride itself on their water station, maybe multiple water stations. I still haven't truly figured that one out, but I do think they take a lot of pride in it, that, and by that they would display the water that they, well, got. So that's where this idea of a canal along, well, not the main street, because Vabbian, almost calling it Vabbi because I talked about Vabbi for quite a while, but Vabbian has this canal basically as a display of like showing how much they know about the area that they live in, that they can have a supply of water, and so much so actually that they can just show it off. Like, this canal is not useful in any way, because I don't think there will be ships on it. I still do think that outside of Vabbian, and or like outside the boundaries of the town, there's less maintenance on heat and water. There's still, because as I said, Vabbian is pretty much a milder version of Vabbi, but outside of the town, I don't think they would first of all have a need, or, well, they would have a need for transportation, but I don't think they would have done that by water. I do still think that they did that by land. So this canal is really just display only. There's no real use behind it. Maybe like small transport inside Vabbian, but outside not really. So again, this canal is really display only. It's just there because it looks nice and it impresses outsiders of like, whoa, they have so much water here that they can just almost literally throw it away in an area where water is a rare thing. Because again, yeah, you have a lot of ice and you can melt it all down, but you would need some proper tools to get it on the same level that Vabbian needs. So I do think they would be proud of that. And then I also want to go into beyond all the water talk, because Vabbi is a very wealthy place. I still haven't truly figured out why. Like, there are some vineyards and there are some mines, so probably like gemstones and wine that they would be able to sell. But then I already said I imagine Vabbian as a wealthy place, so I'm like, what would they sell? Because there are no trees, or almost no trees, outside of the steam pits and Vabbian. Then it's like, yeah, for farming they also need something on the scale of the water station to supply that to their demand, and then they would need to supply even more for export. So I'm really wondering, like, what would they be able to sell, or just what would they have that would make them wealthy? And so then the easiest answer is obviously like gemstones and that. And I do think that Arctic, or just the area that Vabbian is in, would have that, because I have already used a bit too much gems in my building, so to not have that in natural supply would kind of undermine most of what I said in earlier videos about most of the things that are in Vabbian would be found in Vabbian. So I do think that there would be some mines related to gemstones and diamonds and all that. I also think like what else would they supply? I thought of like iced wine. I don't even think if that's a real thing in our world. I do like the idea of just vineyards in like this snowy area. And I just like the idea of like wine or just grape plants with this bit more snowy feel to it. Because vineyards are really warm places like the Mediterranean. I'm going to look into like if there's like iced wine or something to that. Because if so, if that could be a thing, from what I know, Vaddjian would be the only place in Guild Wars to do that. Like, you have the Shiver Peaks Mountains, which is a mountain range in Guild Wars 2. No farming whatsoever almost is going on there. Yeah, Vaddjian would be the only one producing iced wine. I am really needing to look into if that's a real thing or not. But if so, they will be the only ones. And then it would be a proper explanation of why they are rich. Because they would basically have a monopoly on that product. Which is kind of like also, I do think that having a monopoly on something is, you know, good for the one doing the business. But if you want to get it, it's not good because basically they can set the price that they want. Like you have no other option but to buy it from them. Which would make Vaddjian probably a little bit arrogant or a little bit self-conceited. Which sadly does work with like the culture they would have brought over from Vabbi. Because Vabbi is a bit arrogant and, you know, they only really care about themselves. That would be a way to implement that kind of thing in Vaddjian. Having iced wine and be the sole producer of that would make them a little bit arrogant because you can't go to anyone else. Like you can haggle over the price, but they know you have to buy it from them, so it's basically they can set the price. You just have to buy it if you want it. If you don't, have fun seeking it somewhere else which you want. So culture wise, very well on display, water on display, and I'm now coming to the realization that if I implement everything that I've talked about in this video so far, Vaddjian would be a very it would be an isolated place, which also helps towards the self-conceitedness, and that's one thing I wanted to avoid, and I am needing to figure out a way to avoid that a little bit, because that's the one thing I don't like about Vabbi. It's pretty much a narcissistic heaven. They don't really care about the outside world, and that's something I didn't really want for Vaddjian. Though, well, it's kind of unavoidable to have that not on a certain degree, but I don't want it to get on the same degree as Vabbi. So you have a little bit of self-conceitedness, but then mostly on the town itself. Like they look down on outsiders, but not on their fellow, let's say, neighbors. This, if I really want to talk about the whole culture behind Vabbian, this would take the entire series. I'm slowly starting to realize it now. And I do understand that in my videos I don't really like to talk about what I'm building, because yeah, there's not really, I don't really see much in talking about what I'm building, because you guys see that, and I just like my videos to just be rambling about something that interests me, something that, you know, goes through my brain when I'm building. And I hope you guys like that too. But anyways, the video is coming to an end. So I really hope you liked the video. If you do, don't forget to subscribe. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!